In March 2003, a baby was born in the city of Sendai that would change the trajectory of the Jujutsu world forever. His name was Yuji Itadori. From the very moment he entered the world, his life was marked by evil. A heated argument broke out between his father and grandfather Wasuke. "Jin, you can live your life however you like, but give up on that woman, you'll die. Don't talk about such things in front of Yuji. They say babies remember more than we think." It was at that moment that Kaori appeared in the doorway asking, "What are you talking about?" Unbeknownst to the others in that room, a terrible secret was sealed within Yuji at the moment of his birth by Kaori. One of Sukuna's fingers. Nonetheless, Yuji's early years were filled with the warmth of his grandfather's love. But life changed after the death of his parents when he moved back to Sendai due to Wasuke's work. Yuji, now a young boy, found himself adapting to a new life in the city, where he developed a keen sense of justice. But as Yuji entered high school, he found solace in the occult club. But his place in the club was threatened when the student council president declared that it would be shut down due to a lack of members. As confusion spread amongst the occultists, Mr. Takagi, Yuji's PE teacher, revealed that he had secretly enrolled Yuji in the track and field team. The young boy complained about this decision, causing Mr. Takagi to challenge him to a contest. If Yuji wins, he would stay in the occult club, ensuring its survival. Takagi, however, believed that victory was guaranteed. After all, whilst athletically gifted, sure, Yuji was still just a teenager at the end of the day. But it was in that moment that Yuji shattered the shot put world record, astonishing everyone. Though Sasuke, a fellow occult club member, told Yuji he didn't need to stay, yet he felt an inexplicable attachment to the club. It was more than just a place to belong, it felt like fate. And fate it was. As it was on that day that Megami first encountered Yuji, sensing the presence of a powerful cursed object. Sensing Sukuna's finger. Nonetheless, tragedy struck when Yuji's grandfather fell gravely ill. As Yuji sat by his bedside in the hospital, Wasuke wanted to finally spill the beans on Yuji's parents, however the young kid had no interest. Thus Wasuke imparted his final words of wisdom. "You're a strong kid, so help people. When it's your time to go, make sure you're surrounded by others. Don't end up like me." But before Yuji could reply, he realised his grandfather had passed away. Grief-stricken, Yuji completed the necessary paperwork at the hospital, only to be confronted by Megami. He explained the terrifying world of curses to him, revealing that the object in Yuji's possession was no ordinary item, but was Sukuna's finger. But he was shocked to realise that Yuji wasn't in fact in possession of the finger he was after. Thus Megami and Yuji raced back to the occult club, realising that his friends were in grave danger. As they approached, a dark energy loomed over them. Despite Megami's warnings, Yuji couldn't stand by as his friends were in danger. Bursting into the school, he found them cornered by a cursed spirit. With a newfound resolve, he fought to protect his friends, allowing Megami to exorcise the beast. But it was far from over. Another cursed spirit appeared, and in a desperate bid to gain the power needed to save everyone, Yuji did the unthinkable. He swallowed Sukuna's finger. Within an instant, Yuji's body was no longer his own. Sukuna, the king of curses, had awakened, eager to wreak havoc. But just as quickly as Sukuna surfaced, Yuji managed to wrestle back his body, shocking both Megami and Sukuna himself. That being said, Sukuna's fun was only getting started. Megami Sensei and the strongest sorcerer of the modern era, Satoru Gojo, appeared to battle Sukuna, toying with him while simultaneously testing Yuji's capability as a vessel. He passed Gojo's test, but the danger wasn't averted. After all, Yuji was now set for execution. That being said, Gojo saw potential in Yuji and wanted to add him to his team of new era Jujutsu sorcerers. Thus he managed to twist the arms of the higher-ups and get the execution postponed until Yuji consumed all of Sukuna's fingers. Then after that he'd be killed, taking Sukuna down with him. And so for him it was either die now or die later. But with his grandfather's last words echoing in his mind, Yuji decided to live, if only to protect others. From there, Yuji was taken to Tokyo Jujutsu High. Here he would train for a life of fierce battles, all whilst trying to subdue the King of Curses. His journey took him to the streets of Harajuku to meet his new squad mate Nobara, where together on their first mission he successfully kept Sukuna at bay. A month later, Yuji fought alongside Nobara and Megumi inside Kiyotaka Detention Center, but before he knew it, Yuji was faced with a cursed spirit so powerful that he lost his arm in an instant and was forced to rely on Sukuna's strength. But Sukuna refused. Realizing that this was about to get messy, Yuji asked Megumi to get Nobara and leave. That way he could forfeit his body to the King of Curses. Thus, Sukuna makes light work of the special grade. However, as he stands there waiting for the brat to take control again, he realizes something's off. Yuji wasn't coming back. And so Sukuna, laughing his head off, went after his target, Megumi. He confronts him and tears Yuji's heart out, meaning that if the brat took control again, he'd die on the spot, which is exactly what happened. But death wasn't the end for Yuji. Trapped within Sukuna's innate domain, he was forced into a battle for his soul. Despite being outmatched, Yuji was given a second chance by Sukuna. A binding vow was made, ensuring Yuji's resurrection in return for Sukuna being able to take full control of his body for 1 minute when he said "enchain." Moreover, Yuji would forget about this agreement in return for Sukuna promising to not hurt any of the brat's friends during that minute. And so with this binding vow set in stone, Yuji sprung back to life in the autopsy room of Jujutsu High. With Gojo as his mentor and Yuji beginning to understand the dangers of the Jujutsu world, he trained harder than ever, mastering his cursed energy. Each lesson and each battle brought him closer to the role that Yuji was destined to play. However, it was at this time that the Kyoto Goodwill event loomed. After beginning to succeed with his training, Gojo decided it was time to teach Yuji about domain expansions. Thus, they confronted Jogo, a super powerful special grade cursed spirit, with Gojo taunting him. As Jogo angrily unleashed his domain expansion, Gojo calmly explained the technique to Yuji, before then effortlessly overpowering Jogo with his unlimited void, leaving Yuji in complete awe. However, just as Gojo began interrogating Jogo, Hanami appeared, creating a distraction allowing them to escape. Now realizing the threats that were upon them, Gojo stepped up Yuji's training until the Kyoto Goodwill event. Within the following month, Yuji was introduced to the infamous Kento Nanami, a seasoned sorcerer who would guide him on a mission to investigate a strange incident at a theatre. As they explored, Nanami taught Yuji how to sense cursed energy, leading them to 2 spirits. Yuji was left to fend for himself against one, whilst Nanami handled the other, training the new student along the way. Whilst Yuji managed to wound the spirit, Nanami stops him from landing the killer blow. The spirits are then examined, with Shoko revealing the chilling truth that they were once human. With this unsettling knowledge, Yuji and Nanami continued their mission, with Nanami warning Yuji that they'll need to go all out to defeat their next opponent. They discussed the next steps of their mission, with Yuji's focus shifted to finding a boy named Junpei, whilst Nanami looked into the enemy's hideout. Later, after finding Junpei, they try and test if he could see cursed spirits, but he lies and says he can't. Nonetheless, Yuji befriended Junpei as they bonded over shared interests, but their relationship took a dark turn when Mahito, a powerful special grade disaster curse, manipulated Junpei, causing his tragic death right in front of Yuji's eyes. Devastated, he finally come to understand the true malice of curses. Enraged, Yuji fought Mahito alongside Nanami, discovering his unique ability to harm Mahito's soul. Thus, Mahito tries to persuade Sukuna to come out. However, the King of Curses firmly tells the cursed spirit to never do that again. Yuji was once again allowed to see his friends after he, well, you know, died. But Gojo's Gojo, and so he's got a plan. Why not make it a surprise? As the Tokyo and Kyoto students gather with the tension in the air at an all-time high, Gojo rolls in with a massive box. Surprise! Out pops Yuji. Of course, Nobara is furious that Yuji's been alive this whole time and not told her, but there's no time to dwell as the event is about to kick off. After the Tokyo branch's strategy meeting, Megumi checks in on Yuji, who's feeling strong after his secret training. But then the real challenge begins. They run into Todo Aoi, a powerhouse from Kyoto. The others split off, leaving Yuji to take on Todo solo. He dominates, leaving Yuji in the dust. But just as Todo's about to walk away, Yuji bounces back, annoyed at having his head stomped in. However, nobody could have prepared Yuji for what Todo would say next. What type of girls do you like? Once he gets his answer, Todo begins to reminisce about a past with Yuji that never happened, with the two subsequently becoming best of friend. However, in that moment, Yuji is ambushed by Todo's classmates. Nonetheless, using Boogie Woogie, Todo swaps Yuji's position, forcing the Kyoto students to retreat. Following this, Todo and Yuji get back to their battle, where Todo recognizes Yuji's potential, but that's not all he realizes. His cursed energy, well, it's out of sync. Thus, he teaches Yuji the flow of cursed energy through a sorcerer's body. Using his new teachings, Yuji once again prepares to go all out. But just when things heat up, intruders crash the event. Yuji spots a mysterious screen enveloping the area, with him and Todo rushing to save Megumi and Maki, handing them off to Panda before Yuji faces another one of the disaster curses, Hanami. He fumbles his first attempt at a Black Flash, a powerful critical hit technique that he'd learned from Todo, who subsequently slaps some sense into him. You see, anger is a double-edged sword, and Yuji's got to master it. Thus, with renewed focus, he finally lands a Black Flash, unlocking a true understanding of cursed energy. Together, Yuji and Todo take on Hanami in an epic showdown, with Boogie Woogie allowing Yuji to unleash 4 consecutive Black Flashes, seriously wounding Hanami in the process. But the battle was not over yet. Todo pulls a final trick, switching Yuji with the cursed tool deadly to Hanami, and just as Yuji re-enters the fray, Gojo makes his appearance, activating Hollow Purple. Realizing that this was bad news, Hanami tries to flee, causing Todo to stop Yuji, who tries to chase after them, because if he did, Hollow Purple would have cooked him. In spite of this, with the invaders defeated, Yuji reunites with Nobara and Megumi, reflecting on the battle. The event's not over though. They vote to keep it going, and so a baseball game was up next, with a win for Tokyo, but only a small one, as Mahito, during the chaos of the Nanami battle, was able to steal the Cursed Womb death paintings from the school. These would one day change Yuji's life forever. They were his real brothers. He just didn't know it yet. Days after the intense Kyoto Goodwill event, Yuji was straight back into action, heading out on a new mission. On the way, the team discusses the details, however, something's off. Everyone's on edge. Nonetheless, they make their way to Megumi's old school to dig for more info. They ask around, trying to uncover any rumours about the victims tied to their mission, which is when they stumble upon the story of Yasuhachi Bridge. But here's the twist. Hours of investigating the bridge resulted in nothing. No cursed energy, no clues, nada. In spite of this, just when Yuji and the group were ready to call it a night, 2 students rolled in, dropping a bombshell of information. They claim that Megumi's sister might be connected to the curse that they are after. Immediately, Megumi heads out to investigate alone, whilst Akari, sensing the tension, takes Yuji and Nobara back to the hotel. But they all know that things just got a lot more personal for Megumi. Thus, concerned for their friend, Yuji and Nobara head out to find him, asking Megumi about his sister, learning the possible danger that she might be in. Now, little did Yuji realize just how much danger his sister would put them in the future. But first, the trio crosses the river beneath the bridge, stepping into the cursed spirit's territory. Suddenly, Ketchizu, a twisted and powerful curse, barges in. Yuji steps up, deciding to take him head on, whilst Nobara and Megumi focus on exercising the spirit they came for. Yuji handles his opponent with relative ease, but he can't help but worry if the blood that Ketchizu spat at him was poisonous. And so as things heat up, Nobara is suddenly yanked out of the cursed territory by Eso, another curse. Yuji, without hesitation, races after Ketchizu, where during the chase, Yuji and Nobara spot Esso's grotesque back, causing things to go from bad to worse. Eso, furious after Nobara's attack, unleashes a terrifying technique on both of them, which is when they quickly realize that Esso's blood is corrosive, burning through anything it touches. Thus, they have no choice but to run as Eso continues to fire his deadly attacks at them, with one of the shots coming dangerously close to hitting Nobara. Luckily, Yuji grabs her and, using his superhuman athleticism, sprints out of there, surviving by the skin of their teeth. In spite of this, one thing was clear: this was going to be their toughest battle yet. yet. Yuji paused to catch his breath, but this allowed Ketchizu to catch up, hitting Yuji with his cursed blood. As Nobara worries about Yuji's condition, Eso sneaks in and lands a brutal hit on her too. At that moment, Eso activates his technique as flower patterns bloom across Yuji and Nobara's wounds, leaving them both with little time left to live. But Nobara, as determined as ever, uses her straw doll technique on herself, causing sharp pain to both Eso and Ketchizu, freezing them in place. Then, fueled by adrenaline, Yuji releases a barrage of punches at Ketchizu, whilst Eso, desperate to finish things, undoes his curse and charges at Yuji. But the young lad was ready. With perfect timing, he enters the flow state, delivering a devastating black flash that obliterates Eso's arm. Meanwhile, as Ketchizu is killed, Yuji sees Eso break down in tears over his brother's death. For a split second, Yuji hesitates, distracted by the curse's unexpected grief. Little did Yuji realize that the curse griefing and the curse dead were in fact his long-lost brothers. Nonetheless, that moment of mercy cost Yuji, as Eso seizes the chance to escape, hitching a ride on a passing car. But Nobara is quick to act. She uses her technique once more, causing Eso to fall. Yuji doesn't waste a second, and with a determined glare, he takes his chance and delivers the final blow, putting an end to Eso for good. The two take a moment to catch their breath, reflecting on the intense battle, before checking in with Megami, relieved to find him alive. From there, the three discuss what to do with Sukuna's cursed finger. Yuji casually offers to eat it, but Megami cautions him. After all, they still don't know how many fingers Yuji can safely consume. Despite the danger, Megami hands the finger to him anyway, deciding that he is the best option to hold on to it for now. But before they can plan any further, Sukuna suddenly manifests a grotesque mouth on Yuji's palm and devours the finger on his own. Just as they're processing what happened though, Akari shows up and they head back together. 2 days later, back at Jujutsu High, Sukuna taunts Yuji about the finger's powerful awakening, mocking him for the lives that were lost because of it. Yuji, however, unfazed, tells Sukuna to keep it a secret from Megami. Meanwhile, Todo nominates Yuji for a promotion to first grade sorcerer, recognizing his strength and growth. A few days later, after wrapping up another mission, Yuji decides to relax by catching a movie. Whilst enjoying his downtime, Nobara texts him, asking to meet her at a diner where she reintroduces him to Yuko, an old classmate of Yuji's. And so it was time for him to enjoy the final days of his humane happiness before everything was about to change forever. Sometime later, Yuji, Megami and Nobara meet up with Gojo, who leads them to Utahime. Once together, she briefs them on the mission to investigate a potential mole within their ranks. She reveals that they suspect Kokichi Muta, who operates under the alias Mekamaru. Thus, the team heads to the location where he was supposed to be, but when breaking in, they discover that Kokichi is nowhere to be found. In fact, he was long gone, dying in a battle against Mahito, who he was secretly working with behind the scenes. Nonetheless, thanks to him, it was time for the Shibuya incident. On October 31st, Yuji was stationed at Aoyama Cemetery with Meimei and Ui, whilst Gojo handled the chaos in Shibuya. However, Meimei gets a call about a mysterious curtain appearing at Meiji Jingumei Station, and so the three rush to check it out. Upon arrival, they learn of a second curtain alongside the first, and are told that transfigured humans are between the two. Instantly, Yuji realized that his arch nemesis, Mahito, was the one behind it. Whilst Meimei investigates the station, Yuji grows impatient, desperate to get his revenge on the special grade curse, but Ui keeps him calm. When Meimei returns, she confirms Mahito's likely involvement and decides that they need to split up to handle the situation. Inside the station, Yuji encounters a cursed grasshopper spirit and asks if they've seen Mahito, to which the spirit confirms he is deeper within the station. As Yuji listens, he recalls Gojo's teachings about curtains and notices a cursed object behind the grasshopper, suspecting it's tied to the curtain's power. When the spirit starts boasting about how humans taste after Mahito mutates them, Yuji's patience snaps as he launches a fierce attack, warning the spirit not to underestimate humans. Nevertheless, the spirit continues to taunt Yuji, mocking his intelligence, but Yuji confidently identifies him as a grasshopper curse, catching the spirit off guard with his apparent sharp observation. The fight escalates as the spirit attacks with its multiple arms, but usually deftly dodges and studies its movements, getting used to how to fight a four-armed opponent, something which would come in handy for Yuji in the future. Regardless, Regardless, Yuji delivers a relentless barrage of blows, overpowering the curse who tries a hidden trick, attacking with his abdomen. In spite of this, Yuji grabs it midair and snaps it off. With one final move, Yuji kills the spirit and destroys the cursed object it was protecting. Following this dub, Yuji reunites with Mei Mei and Ui as the three head towards the area where the trapped civilians of Shibuya are located. On their way, Mei Mei compliments Yuji on his impressive growth despite not using any advanced techniques. However, Yuji, reflecting on the fight, admits that it would have been much tougher if it had been against Mahito, a theory he'd soon put to the test. But before then, they arrive at the station, noticing that all but one of the people have already left. Yuji questions the remaining man, who reveals that the others were taken away on a train, before their body then deformed. Yuji instantly clocks that Mahito can't be far away now and becomes furious. However, his anger quickly turns to concern as he begins to worry about what had just happened to Gojo. The three head to his location, which is when Yuji suddenly receives a message from the late Kokichi Muta. Satoru Gojo has been sealed. Shocked, Yuji listens alongside Mei Mei and Ui as Kokichi explains how he was actually killed days prior, but had prepared a backup plan in case something went wrong. But he warns them that they are currently being followed by cursed users. Mei Mei quickly spots them and asks Yuji if they're stronger than the curse he had just faced, to which he confirms. Kokichi advises them that there is a barrier preventing them from moving forward, and so he suggests that Mei Mei open a path for Yuji to return and head towards Gojo. But that's when Kokichi contacts Yuji with even more urgent news. The enemy, led by the fake Ghetto aka Kenjaku, couldn't move Gojo whilst the prison realm was processing him. Thus, Kokichi presents a plan. He explains that the sorcerers will surround Shibuya Station and wait for the right moment to strike, coordinating an all-out attack once the barrier was brought down. However, there's a catch. Kokichi reveals that he's been unable to contact Ichiji, causing a bit of an issue. Nonetheless, Yuji presses on, determined to reach Gojo, with the weight of the mission growing heavier with every step. Once Yuji makes it inside Shibuya, chaos unfolds before his eyes as transfigured humans are attacking the terrified civilians. However, Yuji swiftly defeats them with his focus razor sharp. He reaches the top of a nearby building, yelling to Nanami and, well, anybody else even remotely close to him, that Gojo had been sealed. His plan works though, as Nanami, Megami and Ino soon arrive at Yuji's location. There, Kokichi briefs everyone on the situation and outlines what they should do next. Nanami, after hearing the plan, agrees to the strategy, and so he quickly assigns Yuji, Megami and Ino to the critical task of dealing with the barriers, whilst Nanami heads off to find Ichiji. Before setting off, Ino addresses two big issues about Gojo's sealing. Sorcerers saved by Gojo are now going to become a nuisance to the authorities at the school, such as Yuji. But worse still, Gojo's sealing has exposed humanity to danger, as those who had been hiding in the shadows, kept at bay by Gojo's power, may now see this as their chance to strike. The balance of power in the world had been pushed off balance completely, and so with the weight of this knowledge, the three set off knowing that failure isn't an option. However, as Yuji struggles to break through the second barrier, frustration begins to build. So, realizing brute force won't work, the group pauses to strategize. They quickly figure out that the key to slipping through lies in pinpointing the sorcerer who created it. They theorize that the caster is most likely inside of the screen itself, reinforcing it from within. But then, Ino has a breakthrough and suggests a different approach, realizing that the caster might actually be outside. This revelation makes sense, as if the caster is on the outside, it would explain why the barrier's strength feels so impenetrable. Thus, the trio piece together the most likely location, Shibuya Tower. Therefore, Megami summons Nue to fly them to the roof. Once up there, Yuji and Megami leap into action, distracting the enemies whilst Ino quickly shatters one of the cursed objects maintaining the barrier, before then spotting the two remaining objects in possession of the enemy. In a swift move, Yuji and Megami manage to send Jiro, their toughest opponent, crashing down to the ground floor. When they catch up to him, they're shocked to see him completely unscathed, and so the fight rages on with Yuji and Megami giving it everything they've got. But no matter how hard they strike, their attacks have no effect. It soon became clear to them that Jiro's defense is not normal. Therefore, Megami pulls out the classic, "I'm gonna tell my dad on you," trying to claim that Gojo is nearby and will defeat Jiro. Thanks to Yuji's yapping though, he's already well aware of Gojo's current predicament. But hey, not to worry, they'll figure out a new plan. At that moment, Jiro ominously declares that it's time to kill them as Yuji prepares for the worst. But at that final moment, Megumi creates a diversion with his rabbits, allowing the two of them to escape. As they flee, Megumi finally realizes the secret behind Jiro's seemingly invulnerable defense. The secret is that he's in fact very vulnerable. The twist is that the more powerful the attack, the less damage it actually does. And so Yuji and Megumi come out for round 3, this time preparing to land a strong strike, but with Yuji swiftly pulling his punch at the last moment. Once they finally defeat Jiro, Yuji and Megumi break the cursed tools, but to their surprise, only one of the curtains fall. Confused and concerned, they discuss their next steps before Megumi suddenly spots Ino plummeting off the side of the tower. Without hesitation, Yuji and Megumi spring into action, racing to rescue him just in time. Once he's safe, the three regroup and assess the situation. With Ino injured and in need of medical attention, Megumi makes a tough decision. Yuji plans to head straight to the station where Gojo was sealed, whilst Megumi takes responsibility for getting Ino the treatment he desperately needs. And so with their plan set, the two part ways, each with their own crucial mission ahead. As Yuji reaches the entrance to the station, chaos unfolds. He sees humans being viciously attacked, and for a moment, he's overwhelmed. There's simply no time to save them all. Just as panic starts to set in though, Inumaki appears, taking control of the situation. With the path now clear, Yuji rushes into the station, where inside he comes face to face with Choso, the older brother of Eso and Kechizu, and by proxy of Yuji too. However, much like the grudge Yuji held for Mahito, Choso held one for Yuji. And so, without warning, Choso launches an attack, forcing Yuji to defend himself. Despite the relentless assault, he manages to get close enough to strike back. But then, disaster occurs. Yuji's right arm goes limp, paralyzed from blocking Choso's earlier hit. Undeterred, Yuji resolves to keep fighting, ready to attack with his left arm instead. In the midst of the battle, Choso demands to know if his brothers had any final words. Yuji, recalling the sorrowful encounter, replies that they simply cried. Subsequently, Choso's rage flares as the two prepare for a brutal showdown. Yuji starts by closing the gap, knowing that it's his key to winning. Thus he leaps into the air, baiting Choso into attacking, which Yuji dodges. But before he can get any momentum, Choso's supernova attack blasts him, as Yuji is subsequently stabbed in the foot. The pain is sharp, but Yuji pushes through. However, he halts when he anticipates Choso's deadly piercing blood technique. But instead, Choso surprises him by switching to flowing red scale. Then, without warning, Choso finally launches piercing blood, a technique powerful enough to take Yuji out. Yet somehow he endures the attack as Choso's aim was off. As Yuji catches his breath, still reeling from the intense battle, Kokichi's voice could suddenly be heard crackling in his ear again. He explains to him how blood manipulation works. Thus, after listening to Kokichi's advice, Yuji makes a dash to the bathroom. He subsequently floods the room and hides, striking Choso from behind when he arrives, slamming him into the water. Choso quickly realizes that he can't control his blood with all the water around, forcing the two of them into a brutal hand-to-hand fight, precisely like Yuji wanted. This upper hand wouldn't last long though, as Choso manages to land a powerful blow with the blood he had kept dry from the water. Yuji, injured but resolute, stands his ground, with the two exchanging blows. But then, Yuji sent crashing into the wall. It seems like the end as Choso approaches, ready to deliver the final blow. But just as he's about to finish Yuji off, he suddenly freezes, his mind flooded by a strange memory that never actually happened. Following the death of his brothers, Choso is shocked to learn that he's currently one moment away from killing his only other brother. Thus, whilst he comes to terms with the mental and emotional struggles suddenly flooding his mind, Choso leaves Yuji alone and alive. That's where Mimiko and Nanako find him. They attempt to feed Yuji more of Sukuna's fingers, but their efforts are interrupted by Jogo's sudden arrival. He forces Yuji to ingest 10 of Sukuna's fingers, causing the King of Curses to awaken. And because he had not said enchain, it meant Sukuna wasn't tied to the rules of the binding vow he had set. As a result, he had some fun, causing absolute carnage throughout Shibuya. After he had his fun, he gives Yuji control again, knowing that the young brat would be overcome with guilt. Thus, in despair, Yuji screams that he should just die, remembering the promise of his execution. But amid the chaos, Yuji resolves to keep fighting, knowing that dying now would mean his death is nothing more than that of a murderer. And so, determined to make his death meaningful, just like his grandfather wanted, Yuji pulls himself together and returns to the station. But it only gets worse, because as he comes across Nanami and Mahito locked in battle, he watches helplessly as Nanami is killed right in front of him. Overcome with rage, Yuji charges at Mahito, ready to avenge his sensei. Mahito easily diverts Yuji's initial attack, slipping behind him and launching a counter which Yuji barely manages to block. But Mahito's relentless onslaught catches him off guard, thus he lands a painful blow. Frustrated, Yuji demands to know why Mahito can kill so effortlessly, to which he responds coldly, explaining that Yuji will never win until he accepts the cruel nature of life and death. Mahito attempts to pierce Yuji's heart, but the young boy counters with a powerful strike. Mahito, unfazed, regroups and compliments Yuji on his strength, declaring that the real fight is in fact just beginning as they prepare for round 2. Yuji relentlessly chases down Mahito, noticing that he's become much stronger since their last encounter. Then as Mahito disappears behind a corner, Yuji follows, only to come across 2 civilians. Yuji hurriedly tells them to flee, but Mahito strikes, using one of them as a distraction and turning the other into a weapon. Enraged by Mahito's cruel taunts, Yuji charges, only to be confronted by 3 transfigured humans. One spits blood into Yuji's eyes, blinding him temporarily, creating an opening for Mahito, who seizes the moment and prepares to strike before suddenly hesitating. Yuji, wiping the blood from his eyes, notices Mahito's hesitation and quickly deduces that it must be due to Nobara's resonance affecting his soul. This is because elsewhere, she was tied up battling a clone of Mahito. Grateful for her intervention, Yuji takes this opportunity to unleash a barrage of powerful punches on Mahito. Despite splitting himself into multiple forms, Yuji tries to figure out which part contains Mahito's soul. He spots a part of him surging with cursed energy and subsequently destroys it, but realizes too late that it was just a decoy. And so determined, Yuji gives chase and finds himself confronted by 2 Mahitos. Believing that the 2 versions of Mahito will fuse to heal, Yuji prepares to stop them, but instead, the 2 Mahitos pass each other. At that moment, Yuji spots Nobara and realizes that his day is about to get a whole lot worse, because before she can react, the second Mahito strikes her. Yuji rushes to Nobara's side, smashing Mahito into the wall to clear a path, but he's too late. Nobara's eye explodes as she collapses to the ground right in front of him. Within the space of minutes, Yuji had lost his sensei and friend to his most formidable foe. And so, seizing the opportunity, Mahito moves in and hits Yuji with a devastating black flash. But consumed by shock, Yuji doesn't move. Then, just as the curse is about to deliver a fatal blow, Todo appears, using Boogie Woogie to swap places with Yuji and save him from Mahito's killing strike. Meanwhile, Aratanita also arrives to try and help Nobara. Now, in the midst of the battle, Yuji, overwhelmed by guilt, tells Todo that he can't continue fighting. He confesses that Sukuna, through him, has killed so many people, and despite his efforts to save others, he has failed. And so Yuji labels himself a murderer, unable to forgive himself. Sensing this despair, Mahito seizes the moment to mock him and launch an attack. However, Todo, with his sharp instincts, quickly uses Boogie Woogie and kicks Mahito away. Thus, Todo motivates Yuji, reminding him that he must keep fighting for those who have fallen. Reinvigorated by his words, Yuji finds strength to continue. Then, following another Boogie Woogie, Yuji uses Black Flash, delivering a powerful blow to Mahito. Now regaining his composure, Yuji reflects on the burden he carries, deciding to bear Nanami's share of the suffering in his heart. Thus, together with Todo, they launch their next assault on Mahito, showcasing their perfect teamwork. However, Mahito responds by using a technique that sends a wave of force at the duo. The impact pushes Yuji and Todo out of the building, but undeterred, they continue their fierce battle outside. After Todo finishes dealing with the transfigured humans sent by Mahito, Yuji continues his intense face face off against him. But then Mahito activates his domain expansion for 0.2 seconds, a trick he had learned from Gojo, which meant he didn't piss off Sukuna in the process like last time. Nonetheless, Yuji charges at Mahito, but isn't fast enough, as he deactivates his domain and rushes past him towards Todo. However, before Mahito could use Idol Transfiguration on him, Todo brilliantly uses the Curse's hand to trigger Boogie Woogie, swapping places with Yuji at the last second, landing a powerful black flash. In spite of this, Mahito comes to learn the true workings of Jujutsu and unlocks his true form. He attacks Yuji with this newfound strength, and whilst Yuji manages to dodge, his counterattack falls short, realizing just how much stronger and more durable Mahito's new body had become. In a sudden move, the curse grabs Yuji and slams him into the ground with enough force to cause the ground to cave in. Yuji, struggling to maintain his resolve, knows he needs to imbue Black Flash with his maximum cursed energy output if he has any hope of defeating his enemy. Thus the fight rages on, with Yuji landing a Divergent Fist, surprising Mahito with its secondary hit. Then just when things seem dire, Todo reappears. Distracted by his sudden return, Mahito is left vulnerable, allowing Yuji to land another devastating Black Flash. As Mahito pathetically tries to flee, Yuji declares that he will kill him. No matter what happens, Yuji will always kill him. After all, I am you. Then just when Mahito thinks he's found salvation in the form of the fake Geto, he absorbs him. In the midst of all this chaos, Panda and Noritoshi Kamo appear beside Yuji, who's emotionally overwhelmed but relieved to see them. Choso also then enters the fray to defend his baby brother. Panda, confused by the sudden outburst, asks Yuji if him and Choso really are brothers, to which he swiftly denies. However, things take a dangerous turn when Uraume intervenes by unleashing Frost Calm, freezing everyone in the vicinity. Yuji, the only one unaffected by this attack, acts quickly and manages to save Choso, but then just as Uraume escalates the situation with Icefall, Yuji realizes that they may not survive this. Thoughts of impending doom race through his mind as he tries to figure out a way to escape, but with all hope lost, miraculously Yuki arrives, saving the group. She asks Yuji to help her beat up Geto, however, still reeling from his injuries and exhaustion, he can only apologise, explaining that he's simply too weak to stand. Nonetheless, the fake Geto seizes the opportunity and summons a massive number of cursed spirits, bidding farewell to Yuji whilst holding onto the prism realm containing Gojo, claiming that he's got high expectations for him. And we must remember, after all, that is his son. But Yuji, feeling utterly helpless in the face of Kenjaku's escape, cries out in desperation, shouting for Gojo as the reality that they have lost sinks in. Sometime later, Yuji, completely broken, sits on a massive staircase, weighed down by everything he's been through. But then, Choso shows up to console his brother, telling him to go back to Jujutsu High. But Yuji's not having it. He reveals that Sukuna has something planned for Megumi, so he can't give up. Not after everything he's done. He's killed too many people, including Choso's brothers. However, he simply reassures Yuji that it was all a misunderstanding, because when it comes to brothers, there's no need for forgiveness. Now bonded, the two head out to deal with cursed spirits. Yuji claps his hands and boom, two massive cursed spirits appear. They follow him as he leads them straight to Choso's location, who without wasting any time uses piercing blood to take down one, whilst Yuji handles the other. But before they can relax, Naoya Zenin suddenly shows up, looking for Megumi so that he could kill him. Thus both Yuji and Choso enter into battle with him, and just when it's about to get intense, the atmosphere changes completely. Despite Yuji at first believing the presence he was feeling was Satoru Gojo, it was in fact Yuta Akotsu who had arrived. He was there with a single important goal: kill Itadori Yuji. With Gojo gone, the higher-ups could finally carry out his execution. Thus, in a desperate move, Yuji grabs a car and hurls it at Yuta, who just throws it right back. Feeling the overwhelming cursed energy radiating from Yuta, he and Yuji face off. He grabs a knife for defense, channeling his cursed energy into the blade, blocking Yuta's katana. However, the man touted to be the next Gojo is one step ahead. He kicks Yuji hard, exploiting the fact that Yuji's too focused on the sword. And so with the knife shattered and Yuji injured, he retaliates with a kick of his own, breaking Yuta's katana in the process. And just when Yuji tries to close in, Rika, Yuta's cursed spirit, suddenly suddenly appears and pins Yuji down, who, in the confusion of what the hell is going on, was stabbed in the heart. This triggered a buried memory of Yuji's, the one where his grandpa tried to warn Jin about Kenjaku, but it's cut short, as suddenly Yuji wakes up in an unknown place and spots Yuta laughing. He explains that he only pretended to kill him, as Gojo-sensei tasked Yuta with watching over Yuji, and so in order to convince the Jujutsu higher-ups that he truly was Yuji's executioner, Yuta made a binding vow to kill him. However, at the moment of death, once the binding vow's conditions were met and he was free, Yuta used reverse curse technique to restart Yuji's heart. But that's not the only surprise, as it's here that Megumi also reveals himself, and so Yuji confesses what he did in Shibuya. But before he can spiral any further, Megumi cuts Yuji off, angrily declaring that it's our fault. Thus he tells Yuji to stop being selfish and trying to shoulder everything alone, dropping the cold hard truth that they are Jujutsu sorcerers, not heroes. They don't have the luxury of worrying about themselves. Instead, they have to keep moving forward. Nonetheless, Yuji says that as long as he's around, everyone will suffer. Thus, Megumi looks Yuji straight in the eyes and says, "Then start by saving me," revealing that Kenjaku had launched the Culling Games and that Tsumiki, Megumi's sister, was caught up in it. And so Yuji can't run from his destiny. Megumi is counting on him, and the battle for survival is just beginning. A battle that would change everything. Realizing he's now consumed 15 fingers in total, Yuji approaches Yuta with a serious request. If Sukuna ever comes out again like before, Yuta must kill Yuji and put an end to his rampage. Turning to Megumi, Yuji then asks what their next steps should be, and so they need to head back to Tokyo Jujutsu High and get in touch with Master Tengen. But that's not all. There's a bigger mission ahead. They need to figure out how to break the seal on the Prism Realm and free Gojo before Kenjaku can achieve his goal. Before they set off on their journey to find Master Tengen and the Tomb of the Star Corridor, Yuji has to ask an important question. What happened to Nobara? The silence is heavy, leaving Yuji with more questions than answers. But the awkwardness is cut short when Choso suddenly appears. However, he drops a game-changing piece of information. There might be a way to get past the barrier protecting the tomb. You see, Mahito was able to steal Sukuna's fingers and the death painting wounds, and so why can't they pull off the same strategy? Now back at Tokyo Jujutsu High, Yuji is surprised to see Maki introducing Choso as his older brother, who explains Tengen's barrier to the group. He reveals that he's got a connection with the remaining death painting rooms being held at the warehouse and believes he can offer some guidance on how to navigate the situation. From there, they board the elevator down to Master Tengen. On their way, Yuji notices bloodstains from the events that took place 11 years before with Toji. Nonetheless, as they enter the main shrine, they're met with a room of complete emptiness as Master Tengen suddenly appears. Worried that they may have been in cahoots with Kenjaku, Tengen closed off the tomb, which is when he explains how Kenjaku had many names over the years. Yuji, unable to hold back, interrupts the conversation and asks why Master Tengen looks the way they do, which is when they reveal that they're 500 years old, and due to the failed Star Plasma Vessel mission from 11 years before, their aging has sped up. But that is nothing compared to what Kenjaku has planned. He wants to force the evolution of all human beings in Japan by merging all of humankind with Master Tengen. If this happens and even one person loses control, the world will be thrown into chaos, as without any boundaries between individuals, evil would spread instantly. Thus, Tengen needs guards, with Yuki and Choso given the job, whilst the others get ready to head out into the Culling Games to find Hanakurusu, the host for Angel, a 1,000-year-old sorcerer whose curse technique can free Gojo from the Prism Realm after Tengen gifted them the back of it. And so the date is November 9th at 9 AM, meaning Tsumiki only has 10 days and 15 hours to declare her participation in the Culling Games, otherwise she is killed. Tengen continues to explain what the Culling Games are, such as the rules and point system, as well as the Kogane, much to Yuji's confusion. Nevertheless, the young boy is saddened, knowing that he may have to kill again. On the contrary, Maki plans to head off and slaughter the Zenin clan, before then finding Panda and helping with the game later. Yuta decides to enter a colony to gather information, but will avoid avoid nearby ones to prevent fighting his friends. Yuta and Yuji then remembered the promise that they made about killing Sukuna, as that won't work if they're separated. Nonetheless, Megumi reassures Yuji, but says that if Sukuna does take over and Megumi dies, Yuta should kill him. Thus, they stick to the plan they have to find Hikari. In a forest, Yuji and Megumi change clothes, as Hikari was suspended for fighting with the authorities and is now involved in illegal jujutsu activities. And so if he realizes that they are from Jujutsu High, he might run. Thus, they head to Hikari's underground fight club, as Yuji wonders if he will even cooperate. Megumi's not sure, but Yuta claims Hikari is stronger than him, and so they will need his strength. However, as they approach the club, they're turned away for being too young. Megumi calmly tells the guard that they need money, but the guard punches him, demanding to know where Megumi got his information, as nobody is supposed to talk about Fight Club. Megumi lies, saying that he killed the person who told him about this place a month ago. Another guard then announces that the boss is okay with it, with Yuji being picked as the one to fight. Much to Yuji's surprise though, his opponent in the ring is revealed to be none other than Panda. But out of nowhere, Yuji punches his opponent, sending Panda flying, with him faking his injuries, and thus Yuji is declared the winner. Kirara then guides Yuji into a room and meets Hikari, who tries to scam the newcomer. Hikari then offers Yuji a drink, who asks for non-alcoholic as he's underage. Hikari mentions how Gojo couldn't handle liquor, which confuses Yuji, who asks who Gojo is. This makes Hikari suspicious, saying that every sorcerer knows Satoru Gojo and accuses Yuji of being from Jujutsu High and lying. Thus, he attacks and traps the young boy, albeit Yuji does manage to retaliate. He tries to get Hikari to listen, but has no luck. As their fight rages on, Hikari kicks Yuji through a door and outside, where he finds Megumi and Panda fighting Kirara. Yuji tells them to stay out of it, with Hikari taking this as him underestimating his strength, landing a powerful punch. And whilst it causes Yuji's nose to pour with blood, he stands firm and does not resist. Thus, Hikari says he'll listen to Yuji if he can survive this next punch, sending Yuji flying. Hikari mentions how when one sorcerer asks another for help, it's like saying, "Please risk your life for me," and so Yuji needs to prove that he has the fever to make him want to join. Calmly though, Yuji replies that he doesn't have this fever Hikari's looking for, and that he is just a cog. But when he stays limp and silent, Hikari wonders if he's dead and tells Panda and Megumi to take him and leave. But before he could even finish, Hikari's shocked to see that Yuji is standing behind him, explaining how he will follow Hikari until he agrees to help. Angered, he goes to attack Yuji again, but is calmed down by Kirara. Thus, he offers to make a deal. The four sit down and talk, as Hikari is shocked to learn that Gojo had been sealed. Therefore, he agrees to help them with the culling games. Thus, they would need to figure out who's going to which colony, as Panda mentions that Yuta is probably heading to Miyagi. But suddenly, a Kogane appears above Yuji's head and announces a new rule. Players can now see information about other participants, like their name, points, and how many rules they've added, and which colony they are in. What's surprising is that Yuji hasn't been entered into the games yet, so why does he even have a Kogane? Which is when they realise that Sukuna had pre-planned this with Kenjaku already, entering Yuji. Regardless, they ask the Kogane for player information and discover one key player, Kashimo Hajime, who used to have 200 points. Megumi, with growing concern, guesses Kashimo must have killed 40 people already. In spite of this, Megumi insists that they can navigate the culling games without killing, as they ask the Kogane to show players with 100 points or more. Whilst it searches, Megumi explains his theory. Unless people like Sumiki trapped in the culling game escape quickly, past sorcerers in new bodies must have a reason for entering Kenjaku's contracts. He suspects they have little motivation to actually play the game, especially players with lots of points like Kashimo. Understanding what Megumi is getting at, Yuji explains that they need to first find a player with over 100 points who isn't interested in adding new rules, meaning that they can try and force that player to make a new rule that will save Sumiki. But despite finding a player with 100 points, Megumi realizes they've hit a bit of a snag, and that is Rule 8. If a player's score remains the same for 19 days, that player shall be subject to curse technique removal, aka death. death. Thus, he suggests that they add a new rule allowing players to transfer points between themselves. Megumi explains that if friends keep passing points around, then they can avoid losing their curse technique and dying. He also adds another idea. Perhaps players could spend points to leave the game early, so long as they bring in a non-player substitute to take their place. Thus, whilst searching for Angel, they'll also hunt down two more key players, Kashimo, as we mentioned, and Hiromi Higuruma. Therefore, the group now had a plan, meaning the culling game preparations were complete, although even they can't prepare for what's waiting for them in this deadly game. To best search for Angel, Hikaru suggests that they split into two teams. He and Panda will head to Tokyo Colony 2, whilst Yuji and Megumi will tackle Colony 1. Kirara, meanwhile, will remain on standby outside the barrier. Furthermore, since Kashimo is likely a significant threat, Hikari believes it's best for him to be the one to face him. Yuji, however, raises concern about pairing him with Megumi because of Sukuna. Frustrated, Megumi snaps at Yuji, telling him to shut up and stop being self-centered. The two get into an argument, causing Panda to have to calm things down. The weight of the situation hangs heavy in the air, but their resolve is firm. Together they turn to the Cognate and one by one confirm their participation. Before stepping into the action, Megumi gave Yuji one final piece of advice. They needed to be cautious of reincarnated sorcerers from the past. Yuji nodded in agreement, but asked Megumi to elaborate anyway. Thus, Megumi explained that some of the sorcerers they'd face would be from 1000 years ago. Back then, fighting to death wasn't uncommon. These sorcerers craved battle and were subsequently very dangerous. Nonetheless, Yuji was hopeful. Hope which would soon disappear. Nevertheless, they take their steps into the barrier where suddenly Yuji falls from the sky, wondering where Megumi is. As he descends, he spots someone on a building and wonders if they're a player with a light for guidance. Suddenly, another person from the distance flies into him, but Yuji remains unharmed by the surprise attack. He quickly retaliates, surprised at how easily the woman falls. After a quick scrap, Yuji asks about Higuruma, but suddenly another voice calls out, claiming to know the man he's after. The newcomer greets Yuji and asks if he remembers him. Confused, Yuji wonders how this person knows his name and asks who they are. The man apologizes, explaining that he only knows Yuji because he's the famous Tiger of West Junior High. And so as they walk together, he introduces himself as Rin Amai. He explains that the stronger players gather where the city used to thrive, as there are plenty of supplies there, revealing that Higuruma is in Ikebukuro, using a theater as his base. Upon entry, Yuji is shocked to find Higuruma just sitting casually in a bathtub. He asks who Yuji is and what he's doing here, who responds with the same question. After confirming that it is Higuruma, Yuji asks to talk, but Higuruma interrupts, jokingly claiming that as a lawyer, talking to him costs 5,000 yen every half an hour. Sensing something odd about Higuruma, Yuji cuts straight to the point and asks if they can use his 100 points to add a new rule, but Higuruma bluntly replies no. Annoyed, Yuji asks if he's joking, but Higuruma insists that he is serious. He explains that the culling game offers possibilities where the law is powerless. Despite admitting that yes, the rules aren't perfect, Higuruma says he wants to preserve the game's core mechanics and doesn't want it to end too soon. When it comes to rules 2 and 8, he's curious to see curse technique removal in action at least once. Yuji, now anxious, charges his cursed energy, asking Higuruma again to use his 100 points, which is when suddenly Higuruma activates his domain expansion. Yuji, sensing the danger, charges at him, determined to take Higuruma out before his curse technique can fully activate. However, his foot freezes just inches from Higuruma's face. He explains that his domain forbids the use of violence for both of them, and so Yuji is suddenly pulled back to his original position. From there, Higuruma then calls upon Judgment, who announces Yuji is being accused of entering a pachinko parlor underage in 2017. This is because Judgment knows everything about everyone inside. As a result, Higuruma pulls out an envelope and reveals it contains evidence of Yuji's supposed crime, though he won't disclose what's inside. He explains that Yuji must present his case to clear any doubts and earn a verdict of innocence from Judgment. Yuji concludes that Higuruma's domain isn't fatal, relying on instead a binding vow to explain the rules. Thus, Yuji asks what happens if he's found guilty, but Higuruma dodges the question, offering instead 3 options for Yuji: silence, confession, or denial. Yuji considers lying, and Higuruma remarks that if everyone told the truth, there would be no need for trials, and so he urges Yuji to start his defense, warning that judgment isn't very patient. Thus Yuji remains silent, thinking through his options. After all, he did enter the pachinko parlor and played the machines, so lying might be his only way out. But Yuji wonders if this court even offers lighter sentences. Thus he finally decides to admit that he entered the parlor, but claims it was just to use the restroom. Therefore Higuruma opens the envelope, revealing a security photo of Yuji at a cash exchange window near Magi Vegas on the day in question. He points out that Yuji's own admission of entering the premises paired with this evidence casts doubt on his restroom excuse, implying Yuji intended to play the machines despite being underage. Shocked, Yuji listens as Higuruma charges him with unlawful entry, explaining that whilst the law doesn't punish minors for entertainment related offences, Yuji's act still violated Article 130 of the Penal Code. Nonetheless, Higuruma explains that gambling is illegal in Japan, and whilst parlours and cash exchanges are separate entities, Yuji was only on trial for entering the parlour. He tells Yuji that all he had to do was deny ever entering it in the first place, but rather, judgment announces the verdict: guilty with confiscation. They're transported out of the domain, though Yuji feels unchanged. Higuruma suddenly attacks him with his gavel, which can enlarge and reappear at will, slamming Yuji into the seats. Surprised by Higuruma's power, Yuji remarks that his toughness is all he has going for him, but he's struggling to control his cursed energy, and so Yuji finds it difficult to dodge Higuruma's attacks. He on the other hand pauses and asks Yuji if he can't use his cursed energy, which Yuji confirms. Higuruma explains that the penalty of confiscation makes it impossible to use cursed techniques, but since Yuji lacks one, it prevents him from using his cursed energy instead. Realizing the problem that he's in, Yuji swiftly requests a retrial, sending him and Higuruma back to the domain. Judgment now accuses Yuji of mass murder in Shibuya on October 13th, 2018. Yuji, surprising Higuruma, admits to the crime, saying that he won't lie or deny it. Judgment declares him guilty, sentencing him to confiscation and the death penalty. Higuruma's gavel now transforms into the executioner's sword, preparing to kill Yuji. However, he uses his shirt as a decoy. Subsequently, he lands a punch, sending Higuruma crashing into the seats. In spite of this, Higuruma recites Article 31 Clause 1 of the Penal Code, explaining that Yuji was possessed by Sukuna, meaning he is innocent and didn't commit the crime. Even so, Yuji admits that even though he didn't directly commit the Shibuya incident, he still feels responsible because he was too weak. Higuruma then reveals that he dispelled his curse technique because he remembered why he became a lawyer. It was to help people like Yuji. Therefore, he offers him 100 points, adding a new rule allowing point transfers between players. Thus, Yuji receives one of Higuruma's points, ensuring that neither of them will face curse technique removal for 19 days. After Higuruma leaves, Yuji notices Takaba and sees Hanagurusu carrying an injured Megami, becoming acquainted with both sorcerers. 2 days later, Megami wakes up in a hotel, where they all discuss how to use their collective points to save Sumiki. Meanwhile, Hana reveals her condition to unseal Gojo from the prison realm, which is killing the disgraced one, who Sukuna just so happens to reveal to Yuji is himself. Later, he and Megami defeat soldiers brought into the culling game by Kenjaku's plan, and furthermore, Yuji becomes apprehensive towards Hana, fearing that she might replace Nobara, causing Megami to snap him out of it and reassure him that everything is fine. Furthermore, they learn from Maki that Kenjaku has captured Tengen. Thus, they implement Rule 11 to allow a player to leave the game by inviting in a substitute. Ichiji and Maki bring Sumiki into the colony, giving her 100 points to leave the game. However, Sumiki adds a new rule, allowing entry and exit across all colonies. It was at that moment that Megami realized that his sister was not Sumiki, but Yorizu, who had incarnated into her body. Yorizu reveals her desire to fight Sukuna and flies off to wait for him. Panicked, Yuji and Hana try to chase her, which is when everything went wrong. End chain. Sukuna had taken over and couldn't believe his luck. When creating the binding vow, Yuji did not include himself in the deal when forbidding Sukuna from hurting others. As a result, he could tear off a finger and imbue it with his cursed energy and feed it to Megami, finally making him his new and perfect vessel. Yuji, with Maki's help, fights the possessed Megami, but they're frozen by Uraume, allowing Sukuna and her to escape whilst the pair laugh at Yuji's failure. However, it's not all bad, as on November 19th, they succeeded in freeing Gojo from the prison realm, with both him and Sukuna agreeing to fight to the death on December 24th. This gave them a month to prepare, where during this time, Yuji trained with Choso and other sorcerers. They discuss using reverse curse technique through replacement training. Essentially, Ui uses his curse technique to make Yuji swap bodies with the person he's training with to get an idea on how to use different techniques. He learns RCT from Yuta and cursed energy manipulation, barrier techniques, and simple domain from Kusakabe. This was because it was finally time for Yuji to unlock his true potential. Furthermore, he trains with Noritoshi and Choso to learn blood manipulation after eating his remaining death painting brothers. In another meeting, Yuji, Maki, Choso, and Yuta discuss the contents of Yuki's notes. Hana concludes that it may be possible to awaken Megami's soul as long as a curse technique like Mahito's isn't involved, meaning saving Megami may still be possible. They then review Higuruma's plan to use Judgment on the King of Curses. In another meeting, Yuji, Ui, and Meimei discuss Yuta's copy technique, crafting a plan to use Yuji's finger, which is imbued with the residue of Sukuna's cursed energy and techniques, thus allowing Yuta to copy its abilities by feeding it to Rika. But then December 24th, the day of the long-awaited battle, arrived. Yuji and the other sorcerers see Gojo off as he prepares to fight Sukuna, watching the fight via broadcast inside of Rika. But the worst possible outcome strikes. Plan A was out the window. Satoru Gojo was dead. After Kashimo is also defeated by Sukuna, Yuji and Higuruma drop in to continue the battle, with Yuji wearing special gauntlets, hiding the fact that he was missing another finger from Sukuna. Moreover, Yuta and Rika join the fray, aiming to separate Sukuna from Megami with Yuta's domain. As the fight intensifies, Rika throws Yuji into Sukuna, hoping to apply pressure on the barrier between Megami and Sukuna's souls. Sukuna retaliates with a powerful cleave, injuring both Yuji and Yuta, but they quickly heal, impressing Sukuna. Despite the odds, Yuji continues applying pressure, whilst Yuta successfully activates the world-cutting slash on Sukuna, wounding him with his own technique. Yuta reveals to the King of Curses that he had Rika consume what he claimed to be the last of Sukuna's 20 fingers. The bluff momentarily distracted Sukuna, allowing Yuji to relentlessly strike him. Nonetheless, he retaliates, slashing Yuji's chest. Undeterred, he spits blood directly into Sukuna's face, working alongside Rika and Yuta to increase pressure on him. As Sukuna prepares to activate his hollow wicker basket and unleash the world-cutting slash, Yuta quickly realizes what's coming. Whilst Yuji and Rika restrain Sukuna's arms, Yuta goes for his second tongue. At that moment, the blood Yuji spat explodes, as Sukuna's fourth arm is cut, allowing the domain to activate Jacob's ladder. Yuji manages to breach the barrier between Megami and Sukuna's souls, only to find that Megami had lost his will to live. Sukuna takes advantage of this moment to use the world-cutting slash, slicing through Yuta, Rika, and severely wounding Yuji. However, as Sukuna is distracted, Maki Zenin arrives and stabs him. After the domain collapses, a battered Yuji struggles to stand but refuses to give up on Megami. Choso arrives to help, advising Yuji to focus on healing by sending his blood through his wounds. Then together, the two brothers head into battle against Sukuna, taking advantage of Choso's piercing blood to strike whilst the King of Curses was distracted. Thus, Maki seized the opportunity to sever one of his arms. Yuji, seeing this, charged in, thinking that without an arm, Sukuna couldn't use RCT or form the necessary hand signs for the world-cutting slash, and so Yuji proceeded with the attack, but Sukuna countered by hitting Laru with a black flash. Undeterred, Yuji and Choso continued their assault, with Sukuna launching two more black flashes, this time targeting Maki and Choso. However, using his blood armor, Choso managed to mitigate some of the damage, albeit the situation remained dire. Yuji then separated Sukuna from Choso, taking over the fight on his own. Following his brother's instructions, Yuji successfully used piercing blood for the first time against Sukuna, and with Laru's curse technique distracting the King of Curses, it allowed Yuji to land his own black flash. This attack marked a significant awakening of Yuji's latent potential, pushing him even further to truly become the Demon God. He prepared to face Sukuna one-on-one, landing two consecutive black flashes. What's more is that with his awakening, Yuji finally unlocked Sukuna's technique Shrine, something even Sukuna noted with interest. He responds with a slash attack, but Yuji retaliated with another black flash. At the same time, Ino attacked Sukuna with Ryu, giving Yuji the opening to land yet another black flash. Sukuna struck back with a blunt force slash, but it didn't even faze Yuji, who proceeded to hit Sukuna with 2 more black flashes. Sukuna grew increasingly angered by Yuji's resilience, and whilst distracted, Ino managed to land a strike at him using Nanami's cursed tool, giving Yuji the opportunity to connect with yet again another black flash. Following these attacks, Sukuna activated an incomplete malevolent shrine, causing Yuji to activate his simple domain. Realizing that Sukuna's domain would collapse in about 99 seconds, Yuji decided to endure the onslaught, but despite the relentless attacks which eventually severed one of his legs, Yuji managed to reattach it just in time for the domain to end. However, Sukuna then activated Divine Flame. The intense heat of this attack created decompression and overpressure, threatening to incinerate all living beings inside. Therefore, Trosso formed a blood barrier to protect his younger brother, sacrificing his own life in the process. In a vision, Yuji and him spoke, with Trosso apologizing for being a poor teacher and acknowledging that it was only natural for the younger brother to eventually surpass the elder, as Yuji expressed gratitude for his support, thanking Trosso one final time for being his older brother. With his death and the uncertain conditions of his allies, Yuji began to falter as Sukuna approached. But just when Yuji needed him most, Todo arrived, reassuring him that their allies were likely alright and ready to fight once more, preparing for another battle against the King of Curses. Luckily, Todo's Boogie Woogie had evolved, as his Vibroslap allowed him 50 swaps per second. Thus, he and Yuji used this to land hits on Sukuna after each swap. Yuji then threw a cursed energy-infused rock at Sukuna, swapping places with it to deliver a dropkick. Sukuna tried to throw Yuji, but Todo swapped their positions again, giving Yuji the upper hand. Because of this, Sukuna changed his strategy, attempting to predict Todo's next bluff, whilst Yuji gathered his focus for an attack. Sukuna anticipated Todo would swap Yuji's position with Mei Mei's crow, but this turned out to be the bluff. And so with Sukuna caught off guard, Yuji struck him with a black flash once again. Then, fueled by the rage of Trosso's death, Yuji drove his fingers into Sukuna's chest to try and crush his heart. But before Sukuna could even attempt to use his domain, he was interrupted by the arrival of someone else. Despite the figure appearing to be Gojo, it was actually Yuta, who had taken over his body as a last resort using the technique he copied from Kenjaku. Impressed by this, Sukuna pushed Yuji aside to face Yuta as they formed a shrunken domain barrier. After the collapse of this, Yuji and Todo leapt into action, with Todo instructing Yuta to fire off Hollow Purple as much times as possible, whilst they used Boogie Woogie to avoid it. Then, after Todo was hit with a black flash, Yuji went on the offensive, using Boogie Woogie and Yuta's barrier fragments to strike Sukuna again. Spotting an opening, Yuji used Dismantle on the barrier of Sukuna's soul in an attempt to awaken Megami, causing Sukuna to cough up his fingers. Yuji then used Shrine to catch him off balance, but was punched away and forced onto the defensive. However, Todo swapped with Hanakurasu to fire Jacob's Ladder on Sukuna, albeit he punched up debris and raced up the light in an attempt to kill her with a black flash. Yuji chased after him, whilst Todo took the black flash meant for Hana, launching them both into a building. Nonetheless, Yuji went back on the offensive, striking Sukuna and grabbing his ankles to send him crashing into a building. Yuji then attempted Dismantle, but was punched away by Sukuna's regrown fist. Due to the earlier black flashes, Sukuna regained reverse curse technique and healed his prior injuries, before continuing his assault on Yuji, dodging yet another Dismantle. But then, to Sukuna's shock, Yuji began forming hand signs. Thanks to his replacement training with Kusakabe, Yuji learned the basics of barrier techniques and proceeded to activate his own domain expansion, trapping Sukuna within. Inside Yuji's domain was the scenery of a train station from his memories. Inside, Sukuna woke up on a bench in his possessed form of Yuji before the two took a walk. Yuji explained that he had created this domain in an attempt to communicate with Sukuna, with him showing him the town where he had grown up. The two then walked into a park where Yuji used to play, sharing stories of his childhood. The pair came across another park that had crayfish, where Yuji challenged Sukuna to catch one. The two argued about which one was really better before then continuing on their journey. One of the places they visited was Kowai Farm, a location where Yuji's grandfather Wasake had taken him. He reflected on how Wasake had done far more parenting than his absent mother or father ever did. But then the domain shifted to a winter memory, as Yuji recounted times times when he saw snow sculptures during his town's winter festival, amongst other things. Eventually, Sukuna grew frustrated with all these stories, demanding Yuji to explain his true intentions. Thus, he began reflecting on the people who had influenced his life, most of which were now gone. His grandfather, Junpei, Nanami, Choso, Gojo, and even Mahito. He explained that until recently, he believed that life was about fulfilling a set role, and that he thought dying to fulfill that role would be a proper death. But over time, he came to understand that this wasn't true. Simply living a mundane life, raising a family, walking a dog, or even isolating oneself with nothing left behind still had value, as the fragments of memory left behind gave life its meaning. Therefore, Yuji went on to say that the way someone died didn't matter, but what he couldn't forgive was the idea of someone treating those lives as worthless. And so he bluntly told Sukuna that this was why he hated him. He believed that human beings are not tools born with a predetermined role, and that there is no fundamental answer to what makes someone human, good or bad. However, Sukuna bluntly replied that he understood everything Yuji was saying, but felt no emotion or care, a response Yuji had already anticipated. And so he coldly told Sukuna that he would kill him inside the domain if he refused to release possession of Megami's soul. In return, Yuji offered to spare Sukuna's life by allowing him to return to Yuji's body as a vessel. This enraged the King of Curses though, who declared he would sever Yuji's head and kill everyone he cared for. Before their fight went on, Yuji spoke to Megami's soul once more. Megami told him that he had done enough, but in response, Yuji revealed that his grandfather had lung cancer and would occasionally overhear discussions about euthanasia. Yuji explained that in the past, despite the harsh side effects of potential treatments, he could not understand why his grandfather turned down treatment or chose euthanasia, believing that he would have endured it himself. However, after experiencing the various hardships and horrors at Jujutsu High, he began to understand his grandfather's thought process and the suffering that people like him endured in harsh realities. Thus, with this new understanding, Yuji admitted to Megami that he couldn't, in good conscience, tell him to keep on living after everything he had been through. Yet, with tears in his eyes, Yuji did confess that he would be lonely without him. After that heartfelt conversation, Yuji went back on the offensive to fight Sukuna, who cast Hollow Wicker Basket to nullify the guaranteed hit of Yuji's domain. Sukuna taunted him, threatening to kill countless humans as retaliation for his defiance. However, Yuji's prior conversation with Megami Soul allowed him to regain enough control to cast a shadow, holding Sukuna in place. Seeing this, Yuji smiled and rushed in to attack Sukuna. The two grappled and traded rapid blows to each other's heads, with Yuji ultimately overpowering the King of Curses, leaving Hollow Wicker Basket just one hit away from breaking. But before Yuji could strike again, Sukuna used Shrine to break his gauntlet, but just as he prepared to activate his domain expansion one final time, he froze. Sukuna noticed Yuji's other missing finger, and so he understood that the one that Rika ate was not his, which is when the actual final Sukuna finger hidden at Jujutsu headquarters was struck by Nobara's resonance technique, who had been in a coma since Mahito's attack. Yuji immediately understood that Nobara was alive and teared up in joy, whilst his domain's guaranteed hit finally struck Sukuna. He caused the King of Curses to spit out a finger, but was then hit back in retaliation. Sukuna assumed Yuji was at his limit due to the lack of healing and cursed energy consumption in the domain, and so attempted to finish him off. However, Yuji used Divergent Fist, catching Sukuna off balance with the delayed strike. It was finally time to put an end to the cycle of curses, as Yuji hit Sukuna with a black flash to the chest, forcing his eyes to white out. With Yuji's final blow, Sukuna's soul was stripped away from Megami's body as the domain collapsed, reducing the King of Curses to a fading, cursed mass. Yuji confronted the remnants of Sukuna and made one last attempt to reason with him, offering to accept him back into his body. However, he rejected the offer, praising Yuji for maintaining his compassionate facade, but reminding him that he remained a curse until the very end, before then disintegrating into dust. Afterwards, Yuji took Megami back to headquarters to recover. When he awoke, he found Yuji and Nobara trying to pull a surprise box prank on him like Yuji once did. Yuji then gave Megami and Nobara letters he had received from Shoko, which had been written by Gojo. Megami's letter contained a blunt confession that he had killed his father, which he laughed off, whilst Nobara's letter revealed information about her mother's whereabouts. Nonetheless, they had to head back to HQ to save Yuta from Maki's wrath. Both Yuji and Megumi felt the need to apologize, but Maki and Kusakabe told him that it wasn't necessary. Kusakabe even added that it was Gojo's fault for not killing Yuji from the start, though he acknowledged Yuji was also a victim of Kenjaku's Jujutsu terrorism. He admitted that, like Yaga, he held off on killing Yuji and in the end said that everyone's decisions led to the current situation, so Yuji and his friends shouldn't feel guilty. Thus, Yuji defended Yuta's actions against Sukuna despite the incredible risk, whilst also reassuring Ino and Todo that Choso's death wasn't their fault either. Later, Ichiji briefed Yuji, Megumi and Nobara about a new and final mission involving Sota Fukuzawa, whose fiance claimed his face had changed. He'd been cursed 2 weeks earlier, but when the trio arrived at Fukuzawa's apartment, they found him normal, leading them to realize that it was actually her who had been cursed. As Yuji made small talk complimenting Fukuzawa's physique, Nobara took the girlfriend aside to examine her. He informed Yuji that the curse was likely caused by a curse user based on the residual energy. He added that the lack of malice suggested that they might be a surviving player from the Culling game, though he didn't rule out the possibility of a semi-grade 1 curse spirit or higher holding back, similar to what happened at Yasuhachi Bridge. Nevertheless, Yuji said that with the three of them together, the curse user would be no problem to deal with. After eventually finding the suspect and questioning him, the trio learned that he was a disgruntled customer from the girlfriend's hostess club, angry that she didn't remember the expensive purse he bought her. Once the suspect was detained, Yuji reassured him that he wouldn't be executed. The suspect, admitting he struggled with his emotions, said he didn't know what to do next. This reminded Yuji of his final conversation with Gojo. Thus, he told the curse user that if he acknowledged his mistakes, he could atone and work together with them as a team. As they left, Nobara asked Yuji what he had done with the last Sukuna finger, revealing that he discarded it as a talisman. His finger was no longer a threat, and so it was placed back in a box and left in the same spot it was first found at Yuji's school. Therefore, Nobara, Megumi and Yuji could finally live a life free of that threat, living together as friends, finally enjoying a trip around Tokyo. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe if you're new and ding that notification bell, and click this video on your screen right now to enjoy some more.